Let us now approach the subject of modern mythology, the dominant modern mythologies, from the perspective of one of its ruling class, its Epstein class, one of its privileged members, Steven Pinker, who wrote a book I read a couple of years ago, where he critiques the three pillars of modernity, the three, I would call them lies, the three flaws, according to him. And I call him a member of the Epstein class because, well, he was photographed along with Chomsky, and he belongs to Americanism's scientific, acknowledged scientific class. They are sanctioned, even though they critique modernity. This is how the illusion of free speech of an open society is maintained. It's an open society as Popper imagined it, and Soros wants to make it, but it's not an intellectually open society. It has its restrictions. But this privileged class, this Epstein class as it has become known, is characterized by its open critique of the system. It is in conflict at the moment as well. And as I said, Trump is evidence that there is a conflict within this this class, this dominant, this elite class, this ruling class, the Epstein class. And it's a conflict over how to proceed and to deal with America's decline. Now, as I've said, maybe this is too conspiratorial for you, but wokeism for me was Americanism's method of undermining all resistance to its dominion, because Americanism is globalization, and wherever Americanism dominates, it imposed wokeism as a way of destroying traditional values, and in this way undermining all resistances to its domination, to its world domination plans. But unfortunately for them, this has backfired, and it was eroding the American system much faster. For instance, wokeism, one of its issues was demographic. Only now Americanism cannot import what it was eroding, what it was dumbing down, what it was feminizing. In the past, it could import what it lost. But now it cannot, because of the rise of China and India, regional powers, which absorb brain power locally. Now it was forced to import populations from elsewhere. I'm not going to name from where, which had a lower than average IQ. So they could not compensate for what was being lost. And part of this elite realized this impact, the demographic impact on the United States and its power. And this was evident in the fact that America's military could not find recruits to fight in Americanism's wars, its continuous wars of domination. And this is a problem. That's why they are now in a internal conflict. Two factions, a dominant one and a less dominant one, represented by Trump. Trump was elected to put the brakes on this process that was affecting the American empire much more severely than anticipated. They thought they could undermine the world much faster, but the traditional resistances were too strong, and it would take much more than a couple of decades. Whereas the United States had no traditions, had no ethnic identities, had no cohesive culture to offer resistance to its own methods of subversion. And this created an internal conflict between the neocons and a small faction that wanted to put a stop before the empire collapsed. And anyways, so it accepts internal conflict, a dialogue, and Chomsky, for example, critiqued the American empire from the perspective of the Cold War dynamics, from the dynamics of capitalism versus communism, but he did not delve into the roots, the sources. Whereas Putin, in one of his speeches, which has been erased probably from YouTube, and I cannot find it, where he mentions what the Marxist movement was in Russia and the Soviet Union. Anyway, so Pinker is, with Chomsky, a member of this Epstein privileged American elite class. And the reason why he's a member, for those who don't understand yet, is first of all, he's a member of the pinnacle of the leftist movement's victim class. And the second reason is he is a sanctioned member of Americanism's academia. So his critique of America, of modernity, should be taken from the perspective of an internal dialogue. Of course, he, like Chomsky, does not delve deeper into the subject. He sort of alludes to it. So let us begin by reminding ourselves what he said. He called them, I did a search on DeepSeek, and this is what came out: the 3 pillars of the denial. Pinker argues that the blank slate is one of the 3 interconnected doctrines that have dominated modern intellectual life but are all scientifically flawed. When you hear modern, remember, this is America. Americanism is the pinnacle, currently, of modernity. The expression, a variant of modernity. He goes on, the citation here goes on. Number 1, the blank slate, tabula rasa. The idea that the mind has no innate traits and is completely shaped by culture and socialization. He traces this to philosophers like John Locke. We see here the Judeo-Anglo alliance, because, like I said, Protestantism is the closest variant of Christianity to Judaism, and both are nihilistic, and both start from the same premises. So what does John Locke imply here? He implies that humans, and only humans, by the way, this does not apply to any other species except one. Keep that in mind. And why? Because only one species can use language to deny reality, can be nihilistic, in other words. And only one species can be trained to appear to be a uniformity, can claim to be a uniform whole. That is, every human being can be trained to pretend that everybody is exactly the same through the act of imitation, through indoctrination. The superior are forced to conceal their superiority, or to be ashamed of it, and the inferior are raised up by the system to appear to be the equal of everybody else. In the tabula rasa, this it is implied a fundamental part of the modern mythology. That is that a human being is a social, everything about a human being is a social construct. Every disparity is based on society, mainly economics. That's the Marxist model. On Moron, I had a debate once in a forum, claimed that all diversity, all human diversity, all human inequality was the product of trade, which started 6,000 years ago. So he denied the relevance of 70, 80,000 years of natural selection and claimed that in the last 6,000 years, of which only the last 1,000 are sophisticated enough to create such disparities. So in the but let's just take his idiocy as a fact. He claims that 6,000 years ago is when racial disparities were produced, because 6,000 years ago a man established communities, farming communities, and according to him began to trade. So this trade, according to him, is what caused human disparities. This is again the Marxist model that is dominant. Don't think that modernity is Marxist or capitalist. It could be either one, as long as it accepts the core principles of modernity. And one of them is this: that all human disparity, including sexual, the differences between men and women, and always it has to be psychological, mental, intellectual, because they cannot deny the physical. They can only reject it as reject its relevance. They cannot deny that there's differences. They can just pretend that they don't matter as much. What matters for them is intellectual parity. That for them, both Marxists and capitalists, everybody is born with the same potentials. And what happens is society corrupts and makes some people less intelligent and some people more. That's why education is for them a salvation. It's part of their salvation myth. So education is supposed to attain parity. This is why affirmative action was proposed a while ago, and it failed. And why did they fail? They didn't accept the fact that maybe they were wrong. Their core idea was wrong. They had to find some other reason why they failed. So why did they say they failed? Because of systemic racism. They will always find a scapegoat. I've mentioned this in my monologue about scapegoats. What this also implies indirectly is who's responsible for this disparity? Whitey. Europeans. Colonialism. This is now the new evil. There's the good guys, all the other ethnicities, races, genders, and the bad guys are white, heterosexual males of European descent. That's the dichotomy, the binary now. They also maintain the illusion of salvation, that is, with proper socialization, with proper training, education, with proper social engineering, in other words, they can attain their utopia, their world where everybody is exactly the same, has exactly the same potentials. Let's move on to Pinker's second pillar of denial. The noble savage. The belief that humans are born good and peaceful and that evil is a product of civilization and corrupt institutions, a view associated with Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Now, this alludes to the demonization of European masculine paternalism, as they call it, European heterosexual masculinity. This is now the big corrupter, the evil, because according to them, the American Indians, let's take them as an example, were living peaceful lives before white man Whitey came and corrupted them. They never took slaves. They never slaughtered each other. They were never brutal with one another. They were peaceful and innocent until Whitey comes to destroy their peaceful innocence. Because who corrupted the world? Whitey did. Who enslaved blacks? Whitey did. It wasn't blacks themselves that enslaved blacks and then sold them, not only to whites, but to Arabs and other peoples. It was only Europeans. They're the evil. In the American system, that's what kids are taught. Whites were never slaves. The only slaves in the world are blacks. Blacks are the second rung of the victim hierarchy. First is the Epstein class because of Holocaust. Second is the African Americans, because of slavery. So we have the two pinnacles of the slave hierarchy for the leftists in the United States. On the third place, we have all the byproducts of modernity, of Whitey's civilization. That is all the sexual deviance, all those mutations that were accumulated due to the protectiveness of modern societies. And in that group, we also place women. Women are the third victims of European paternalism. And this concept is very biblical if you study it. It reminds us of the story that Adam and Eve were placed in a Garden of Eden where there was no suffering, no evil, and until one day they decided to break the rules. This is the same thing from a secular perspective. Now we have the noble savage who exists in the gardens of the world as innocence, just minding its own business, never being cruel to one another. And then suddenly Whitey appears, the snake in the garden, to corrupt them. Now let's finish off and go to Pinker's third pillar of denial. The ghost in the machine. The Cartesian dualist idea that there is a soul or spirit separate from the physical body and brain, which is the true seat of personhood. And here we see the biblical Abrahamic connection vividly. In Judaism, it is described as the divine sparks that are trapped in the kalipots that must be shattered so that they can return to the divine source, that is uniformity. In Christianity, it takes the shape of a soul, an immortal soul that is trapped in a mortal body. And what is the true essence of man? It is his soul. It's not his body. His body is the evil. His body is to be denied and transcended, escaped. This is part of modernity. Those pretending to be atheists, nevertheless, have adopted secular versions of the same bullshit, the same nihilistic lies. So what is the soul? But it's a uniformity. All souls are exactly the same. Whereas the body is the seat of divergence. This is why the body must be denied. right? Appearances are superficial. You can't judge a book by its cover, right? That's what they tell you. That's the body. The body reminds us of what we want to reject as moderns. The body is a manifestation of the past, and the past is what we're fleeing, what we're supposed to be fleeing. And it feels good. The idea is very inspiring, very comforting. That's why these ideas are so seductive and they've become so popular. And the more the populations grow and all these unfit mutations multiply and feebleness and emasculation proceeds, the more these ideals become seductive and popular amongst those who are desperate now to find something to feel proud about, feel something to base their self-esteem, to base their identity on, other than the body. The body is, like I said, to be sacrificed. Like Jesus sacrificed the physical on the cross, so too modern man must sacrifice, must give his pound of flesh in order to gain access to paradise, to, in modern terms, utopia. Because where paradise is positioned in a beyond space-time, utopia is positioned in a forever imminent future that never comes. So it remains platonically ideal because it never becomes realized. It is never realized. So here we see how modernity can adopt nihilism and secularize it. That means bring it up to date with scientific knowledge, update it. That's what modernity is. Updated bullshit. So all these moderns who think they're atheists are really worshiping God. Only now they call it something else. Some people call it humanity. Some people call it order, absolute order, universe, or like Spinoza, call it Deus. Whatever it is, they just updated their terminologies. Schopenhauer called it will. Instead of God's will, he just took away the God part and just said will. Spinoza just declared that nature was God. What is important is that the scapegoat must be preserved, and the delusion of eternity, of eternal life, must be preserved in some form. In Nietzsche, for example, the eternal recurrence is such a delusion, an updated delusion of the same mythology that claims that man is, when he dies, he lives forever in paradise. So in the notion of the eternal recurrence, everything repeats. So that means man never dies, never actually dies. He just relives his life over and over again, which is sort of like the Eastern Hindu concept of reincarnation. Only there is not even a karmic cost, karmic residue. Every time man repeats his life, it's as if he's living it for the first time. So there's nothing to be ashamed of, right? Whatever you do, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. Everything is as it should be. Everything is perfect, so don't worry about it. Don't feel insecure. Don't feel regrets, because that's why he rejected free will. So where Abrahamism weaponized shame and guilt, modern secular nihilists totally reject shame and guilt. They are not ashamed or guilty of anything because they could not have done anything other than what they've done. So there's no need for salvation because you can never break God's laws because they're absolute. Ergo, there is no free will for both Schopenhauer and Nietzsche and many other moderns. Consider the hubris in believing that you deserve eternal life. All that humility they exhibit is really a farce, a pretense, because they've outsourced, they projected their arrogance upon an external agency, the scapegoat, right? The Jews, they say it's not them, God. God commands them. They are just minions through which God expresses himself in the world. So it's not them slaughtering the Palestinians. That's God's will. In the secular version, it's not them. It's not moderns that are doing, uh, raping children, let's say. It's just the way things have been determined. They could not have not raped the children because God now is defined as absolute order. There is no chaos in existence. Everything is ordered. Therefore, everything that occurs, it's part of a cosmic plan. You cannot break the laws of nature, right? Therefore, whatever you do, you could not have not done them. So you don't even have to call yourself innocent. You're not guilty. You're not innocent. You just are. Whatever you do is part of the cosmic plan. But consider the arrogance of these humble ones, that they deserve to be preserved for eternity, that a omniscient, omnipotent being cares about them, has created existence, all of existence. Our planet is like a speck, like a grain of sand on a beach. Consider the numbers here. There are billions of stars in our galaxy, of which our sun is just one. Billions of them, hundreds of billions of them. There are hundreds of billions of galaxies, and yet we think that we deserve eternal life because God loves us and He made us in His image. Yep. Consider the arrogance of that. Consider the arrogance of believing that you were chosen by some entity to be His representative on earth, to conceal your guilt and your shame through a proxy, a fake proxy, a non-existent existent proxy. But using proxies is their MO, isn't it? And what is the use of proxies called? Parasitism. So Pinker gives us three modern myths, three foundational myths of modernity, three pillars. I think there's more, and I'm trying to explore them on YouTube as long as I can before they take me down. Eventually, if I become very popular, they will take me down. So the three pillars are blank slate from John Locke, an Anglo, and I've explained in other vids why the Anglos are so resentful. There's historical trauma. Everybody when they talk against popular mythologies, they all suffer from some kind of trauma, right? They're resentful, they're angry, they're hateful, they're bitter. Well, this is why they do it, because they suffer from trauma, from historical trauma. Consider the trauma of the Anglos, and I'm not going to get into it in this monologue. The second is the noble savage, that man before he was civilized was this pure, innocent creature. And the third is directly linked to the Abrahamic nihilism of our time that dominates our time, the idea of the ghost in the machine. Now, before we continue and close, let's deal with some of the defensive reactions characterizing moderns. these modern midwits and dimwits that simply parrot whatever they see around them without understanding it. They parrot the same defensive reactions as well. The only way they can deal with critique of their sacred cows is by accusing them of what they are most guilty of. I've said this numerous times. This is projection, classical projection. The liar is quick to accuse those who are about to discover him, to expose him, of being liars. The one dominated by fear will be quick to accuse you of being afraid, of expressing opinions based on fear. The ones who create their perspectives using emotion are the first to jump onto the opportunity to accuse you of being emotional simply by expressing yourself passionately. They want to pretend they're rational when their entire worldview is emotional, feminine. They are emasculated men children, I call them. So if you critique or you expose the negative aspects of their sacred classes, they will attack you as a misogynist. That's classic. As a racist, implying that you want to harm or enslave or be brutal towards other races just because they're different. That you're a misogynist because you haven't put women on a pedestal and kissed their arse like many of these omegas have done. The shit I've seen men do to get laid, it's pathetic. The degree of self-abasement I've witnessed in my life is incredible. These men are put women on a pedestal, and if they manage to have daughters, oh, then it gets worse, much worse, because now they have skin in the game, as the other one said. So if you're not worshiping women as empowered, like the moderns, the empowered, strong women that all men are afraid of, right? This is why they remain spinsters, because men are afraid of them. This is the mythology. If you don't put them on a pedestal and kiss their ass and say, oh, how wonderful you are, it's us males that failed you. It's us males that failed you. You have done nothing wrong. If you don't do that, then you must be a misogynist. If you don't say the truth about the different types of humans, let's just say that, let's use more ambiguous language, then you must be a bigot. Even though what they're saying contradicts natural selection. Every species has a subspecies. This is how subspecies and species evolve. There's there's a formula to it. There's environmental stressors, adversity, as I call it, environmental adversity. There's isolation and time. These are the three factors that create the multiplicity of life as we know it on Earth. And they go through steps. Species don't just magically emerge out of nowhere. They gradually developed over time. And if the time and the isolation and the stressors are not sufficient, then this division is incomplete. And we see examples of it in nature. So there's species and subspecies that are produced using this formula. Adversity, time, and isolation. Isolation is a major component of the process. This is all part of natural selection, Darwinian. And it applies to all species, including man, unfortunately. The environment doesn't only affect the physical body and yet leaves the brain untouched, as if it was some other thing, like in the Ghost in the Machine, this other essence that's unaffected by the environment. as if it doesn't emerge. It's not an emerging quality of the brain. It's something other, right? That's why they deny the effects of the environment on the brain, even though they can't deny it on the body, because they're the Cartesian model that I spoke of before. They are governed still by this model, which is Abrahamic. Maybe its roots are more ancient than that. It goes back perhaps to the Zoroastrians, but in Abrahamism has it been used as a weapon, as a tool of social manipulation. So we have the three sacred cows, the untouchables in Americanism, in the current modern ideology. The first is ethnicity, race/race. The second pillar is gender/sex. And the third shall remain unnamed because, as Voltaire said, those you cannot critique are the ones who ruled over you, and they still rule over me. Although the current war that is happening might be shaking this dominion they've had over the world for the past 100 years, since the end of World War II, maybe. It reached its pinnacle, its height, its apex during the decades of between the 60s and the 90s, but now it's in decline, and in its desperation, it is fighting left and right to preserve its dominion. But the third pillar is the most important one, because it is the one that propagates and supports the other two. Let's just call those the Epstein class. The Epstein class that is dominating and ruling the United States. Within the second pillar, gender, sex, I will include all the paraphilic protective classes. You know which ones I'm talking about. The latest ones being transsexuality. But there's been others. There's another before that. In fact, if that one hadn't been normalized, then we wouldn't have gotten to the second one. And now that the second one is being normalized, although it has suffered a setback with the election of Trump, when he leaves office, and as long as the American empire stands, they will have experienced a resurgence, and they might even move to the next paraphilia to be liberated from the closet, from the Kelly pots. And the way you enforce silence is through peer pressure. The system doesn't need overt violence to silence. It's more sophisticated. It's advanced now. It's modern. Now it uses other means. As the author of Silence of the Lambs put it, Thomas Harris, who used Hannibal Lecter as a representation of himself. And he made this character speak his own personal opinions. He said, and I quote, "People don't always tell you what they are thinking. They just see to it that you don't advance in life." That's exactly true. And the primary agents of social stability, of the status quo, of political correctness, is the feminine. And that would include emasculated beta males who, through these virtues, want to signal their social fitness, as I explained. elsewhere. They exclude you from their social gatherings. They exclude you from work options, from their networking. They exclude you from their sexual options. This is how they punish you for not repeating the bullshit they need to remain sane